we are extremely relationship-oriented fund. So for us, the individual, irrespective of the stage of the business, is absolutely the prime evaluation / criteria for partnership. Just a little bit more color there. So the social motivation has to be built into the not just the DNA of the individual, and also in some of the senior management and the business model that is there. Apart from all the usual things which I'm not going to mention, so this is something that we hold very dear as a criteria. In terms of post-investment, I guess there are two ways to look at it. What is where we are coming from, and what the space typically requires. If you look at the space, I would say 75–80% of the companies that we end up talking to would fall into either companies which are, and I'm not even talking about incubation and all that, because we, as Lok, we don't do that. Companies which are trying to establish a proof of concept, but they already have some operations on the ground, or companies which have a proof of concept and trying to now at least prove scalability, but still not scaling. So that's about 75% of the universe. And the rest, 20–25 is probably even less, 15–20 is people who have now at least proved scalability in a limited geography, and now they want to really scale up. So that's the growth side. If this is what the universe is, for me, I guess the operating model is predetermined. As an investor, you need to have the capacity to be able to therefore work with this and have a slightly more operating mindset and a deep dive mindset if you want to partner with these companies. That's pretty obvious. And that's exactly what we do at Lok. All the senior people, senior team in Lok is of operating people. I started Lok in India, and Lok is the only investment experience that I've had. Prior to that, my whole experience was operations. So I think that kind of sums up the way we look at this thing.
So the sense we're getting here is that there are people who need money, and there are plenty of funds with money. You could go wrong if you choose the wrong kind of partner. Satish, you outlined the criteria beautifully, the various kinds of partners for investing that you could potentially run into. So if the unhappy experiences, it's because the match was not right in the first place. But wherever the match has been right, there's been possibly a happy experience. So, which brings me to a question for you, Satish, quickly. Overall, is there more money in the market chasing deals, or is it vice versa? What is the demand-supply situation when it comes to money and the number of projects or deals that are there in the market?
I think that's a very good question, Shrikant. If I put on the lens of scalability, I would say there's probably more money out there than there are opportunities, and that's probably going to come as a surprise to many of you. And the reason is getting a clear sense of the scalability topic. Many conversations don't go very far or go wrong because between the entrepreneur and the fund, that issue of scalability has not been nailed, right? So the discussion goes somewhere else, or it becomes an unhappy discussion, or the entrepreneur gets turned down and therefore feels rejected and then doesn't talk to anybody else. So I would argue that there are probably a lot more scalable opportunities out there, right? And probably many of you qualify. But think very hard about two things. One is be very persistent, never give up, because pivoting your model has to happen multiple times. So in the beginning, it may not have been scalable, but at some point it might be. The second is get as much help as you can from others who have gone through this process to figure out what are the few key things you need to actually articulate well about your business that will help the investor understand that this is truly a scalable proposition. So lots of money, I agree. More money than probably opportunities. And by saying this, I'm excluding the MFI space. If I include the MFI space, it's an order of magnitude even more. Because if you look at the largest investor companies out there, are the MFI companies. And they are in the billion-dollar plus categories, right? What Saurabh talked about would be a midget compared to the MFI investors out there. They are tens of billions of dollars large. So they are banks, essentially, right? So keep in mind, there are the gorillas out there who are doing MFI. We're not talking about that, I would imagine, in this space, but there are a whole bunch of people from 10 million to a few hundred million that would fall into the space that would be relevant to all of you as entrepreneurs.
So there's lots of money available. So Jeevan, do you run into a problem where money is available, but the entrepreneur you're talking to, while you want him to have social objectives, lacks financial or business orientation, because many of these people may come from an NGO background where they're used to receiving grants, where accountability in terms of achieving business milestones is probably lower. Do you see that challenge?
Yeah, I think that has been true especially with people from NGO background. But there are always exceptions, right? So we also come. We've seen entrepreneurs with with NGO backgrounds coming up with really great ideas and solutions just based on the fact that they have the experience of working at the ground level and who are scalable and ideas that are investable. That's it. And then, well, there are exceptions to the other way also. People with great corporate backgrounds and for-profit experience, etc., are also slightly focused on somewhat utopian ideas, which are not maybe I would say suited for venture capital investment or the kind of investment that is expected at an early stage. Because by definition, the expectation is it is patient capital, but the expectation is that the business has to return money and then has to have a certain level of growth just to support the money that's coming in. That's what it is.
So, Puneet, Husk Power has obviously succeeded twice in raising money. And once you go through that stage, in terms of how the investor engages with you other than money, where have you really seen value beyond the money that comes in? What are some of those one or two things that you can share with us?
See, I think that there's been a lot of value from the investors, but at least all the the bench of investors we've had. Firstly, I think it's the kind of network access they can give you in terms of once you've raised equity capital. Your business doesn't really rely just on equity. So the next step is obviously raising, someone raised the point about the working capital debt and, about long-term debt and everything. And all those things are very critical for the next scale up. So I think, introduction to relevant people and all those things, come in handy. The second thing was really around, I think most of the social not most actually, but most of the social investors we have, they have a fellows program or something where they kind of attach someone for, some existing professional for about 9 months or, a year to your company, kind of helping you work on certain identified areas. So I think that's really helpful as well. Not too much direct, direct advice on the strategy or something is there, but I think that's absolutely okay. But I think investors, kind of really help you ask the difficult questions at times, and I think that's an indirect perk of having an investor, because as a social enterprise, I don't know why the entrepreneur's mindset is always just focus on social thing, and they kind of forget the sustainability side of things. So the investor pushes you to ask the tough questions, and I think it's a fine balance between the both which you need to maintain at the end.
So help and interference are two sides of the same coin. Vivek, do you get into debates and arguments with your investor about either strategy or execution?
I think investor and investor relation is like of Saas Bahu relationship. So I cannot say it's going to be all goody-goody kind of thing. That has to happen because especially when you are into this space, basically social venture. So there are some things which you start on the basis of assumptions. sometime it may work, it may not work. Like I can share our own example with Unitas. We had this thing that monthly basis we would be sharing operational financial forecast, and on quarterly basis we would be having interaction either over phone or whatever medium is there. So I think if these kind of medium of interactions are there, then it makes life easier for an entrepreneur, because there are certain things which you are really able to put before the investor. Initially, as someone has said rightly, initially we may have very good assumptions, and especially in social sector, but I have seen generally they don't work, at least 80-90% cases, they don't work the way we plan it in Excel sheets. So, but there has to be someone who is ready to listen why it is not working. But if the investor, say for example, if that communication is not there, or if the investor expectation is based only on so-called Excel spreadsheets numbers, then things may go wrong.
Samir, tell us one argument you may have got into with your investor which kind of remained unresolved. Anything that you fought about bitterly? Did you face that situation?
Actually, no. To my investors' credit, and these are very reputed investors, they have invested in many companies, many social sector companies as well. We have a very good relationship in that sense that we get very genuine inputs. It's just that they may actually not work out in the context of our experience that we have had. The presence of investors, in fact, our investors have done things which normally investors would not do to support the company when the company was in bad shape.
Like what?
Including, for example, pulling out money from operations fund and lending it to the company when needed. So these are not very usual things that investors do. And so to their credit, I think one, they have been very patient. And this is just a personal experience that I'm quoting. So they have been very patient given the time that we have taken as a company together to reach to wherever we are. And we are actually also very happy together as where we have reached till date. It's just that for the new set of investors that we are looking for, we are more credit worthy to the bank than to the new investors.
Okay.
So that's exactly the point I want to bring. It's not something that is an issue with the existing investors, but the issue with the kind of returns that in general investors are looking for, or the kind of I would say segment, or the customer segment. One of the points I would like to also touch here is the involvement of government as a customer in various segments really puts government or NGO as a customer in the business model, really puts a lot of investors off. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a sensitive issue, and I think we should discuss this because a lot of social sector does need government involvement, policy involvement. Some regulations are stuck somewhere. Some things need to be moved out of the way to have things proceeded fast. Apart from just the delays in the business models that typically happen. So what do you do? Do you decide to sort of stop moving forward because the time is not right and wait for the right time?
I think what we need to do as a sector, and again, I'm saying this is not just for social enterprises, but also for the both sides. Focus on impact and let the impact do the talking. I think that's very, very critical. Otherwise, again, as I said, right, I mean, I am sitting in front of entrepreneurs and I'm thinking that, hey, this is a company which after 5 years, if I commit money, there is a good chance that it might not work, and that's fine. That's the risk you take. And I will be at that time really very seriously analyzing what went wrong, right? What happened. And I get a sense that this entrepreneur, just because of during this 5-year period, the amount of status or an image boost that this person has gotten because of the space might be good enough for him or her to consider it's a success. Yeah. Now that's a very, very dangerous.
So loses the fire and the ambition.
And it's very subjective issues. How do you get out of that? I think the other main thing which I'm sensing again, just from the discussions going on, I think we need to realize that as a sector also we're just evolving, And all these financial criteria, return criteria, impact criteria. I mean, 7-8 years ago, anybody who thought was doing social was a social enterprise, and anybody who put money in that was a social investor. Clearly now there are many more institutions, organizations that are working on defining this impact, and that's I think that's a good progression. Return criteria is also, Satish did point out this differentiation between, the MFI and this. The fact is, most of the social investors, the impact investors, we did spend a lot of our early days in working in microfinance, which was completely an anomaly, right? I mean, huge sector, and for a lot of us, we thought, hey, we hit it, and everything else will work like this. There's social and there's commercial, and there's huge amount of capital required, so everybody was in the party, and but I guess post that, all these return expectations are getting absolutely normalized. I mean, they have to. That's the fact. So I think that's okay, and that's an evolution that we need to. But the last point that you mentioned, Samir, I think the policy point in this space is very critical. You asked about things that could be different. I think we do need organizations, initiatives, funds, and I've been closely talking to Saurabh and his team regarding the IIIF fund. There is clearly a motive there to work on the advocacy piece also. The fact is the policy/politics in India is still at a stage where for them to accept private solutions to these problems is not a very viable proposition. That's a fact, right? In fact, they sometimes even see it as a threat, right? For what for what the political economy in India is, and that's again a fact. We need to realize that. So unless there is a very concentrated effort on bringing them on the same page or working with them or slash making sure that we are not seen as a threat, I think it's extremely critical, because I think financial capital, human capital over the last 7-8 years has become much more readily available, and it's wonderful. That's one of the most important progresses we have made. But policy is where, and microfinance regulatory issue, RTE, right to education, is again, because microfinance people have many different mixed views. So, but RTE, look at RTE. I mean, we had a wonderful innovation going in India in terms of low-cost schools. This is one regulation, which again, when I talk to people more generically, it's perceived as one of the revolutionary reforms that we have seen in the recent. It completely kills the low-cost education school model in India, right? So I think, and this is the kind of debate that needs to happen much earlier rather than now thinking about how do we amend it, and that's the kind of debate that is happening. But main point is that policy we cannot ignore, especially when we are dealing with inclusive businesses, and and that hasn't gotten as much attention that it should.
Investors should not run shy of that as well.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, we are struggling as a VC fund whose mandate from our investors being the multilaterals, IFC, CDC types. How do I make this very, so luckily we do have a foundation that can take up this role, and that's what we're trying to do. But absolutely, I think that's a very legitimate question that we have.
I'd like to thank all our panelists. Thank you very much, and thanks for listening.